following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys? Yeah!
Into a very special joint podcast following the opening press conference for 2020 Cowboys training camp presented by American Airlines. Rob Phillips at home, joined by Mickey Spagnola at home, David Helman at home. I guess you could call this the Talkin' Mick Shots break for 30 minutes or so. How about that?
I like that. Yeah, I like
good.
That. Good.
That's a good start.
It's great to see you guys, and I'll be seeing you very soon with practice finally starting up for the Cowboys at training camp on Friday. They'll be in shells, but it wasn't the tennis courts at Oxnard today. But the Cowboys did have their opening training camp press conference with Cowboys owner Jerry Jones, COO Stephen Jones, and head coach Mike McCarthy. We normally do this every year leading up to camp, but guys, so much to unpack this year. It is a training camp unlike any other. Obviously, we are sheltered in place right now. And look, the Cowboys are going to try to pull off this camp. The NFL's trying to pull off a season during the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's been such a long time since we've heard from Jerry and from Dak Prescott, who spoke afterwards. So much has happened in the last few months off the field, and not even necessarily fully related to football. The pandemic, a social justice movement in our country. And I guess, guys, let's just start there because those were two items that Jerry really touched on right off the bat before we got into football. What were your takeaways from what Jerry had to say and maybe from what Dak had to say about the challenges and some of the other issues that the Cowboys are dealing with right now?
Yeah, I'm not sure we got anything totally concrete from Jerry on those topics. I guess the thing that stuck out to me, he was talking about making sure that he was listening to the players, listening to different people, and doing so with an amount of grace and not going in there and say, this is what I think and this is what we got to do. So it'll be interesting how they work through this and what they come up with. But that's what stuck out to me, that he wasn't mandating anything for his team, for his players, and I guess we'll kind of see where that goes with him.
Yeah, I think if I had a big impression from any of it, I think it's that Jerry Jones and Dak Prescott both. I think they understand how divisive and how much of a hot button issue that is. For better or for worse, it is what it is. But people are going to feel some type of way for good and for bad on both sides of it. I think Jerry knows that. He used the word grace a lot, talked about we're going to come to some understanding. We're going to figure out what to do about this, and we're going to try to find a medium that's going to satisfy everybody. I don't know if that's possible, but I admire the thought. And then the same thing with Dak, talked a lot about wanting to listen, wanting to unify, wanting to get everybody on the same page. Even mentioned, Jerry, we just talked. It's been a long time since Jerry has talked. That hasn't gone unnoticed in the world of sports. Jerry's obviously one of the most visible figures in the entire sports landscape. Dak going as far as to say, sometimes you want to make sure you get your ducks in a row. You want to make sure you're listening and saying the right things. Certainly seemed like Jerry's intent. It seemed like a very prepared sentiment. I'm curious to see how they execute it because, like I said, I think it's easier said than done to satisfy everybody about those types of issues.
Rob, let's stick out.
And what you guys are referencing is the anthem and what players might do, whether players might kneel for the anthem. Obviously, Jerry's stance has been to stand for the flag. We'll see what happens there. I think what you guys hit on, though, Jerry says he's listening, and Dak says it's a time to listen. And what we've seen from Dak, and he touched on it as well in his interview, players have a platform that they feel is very important to use. And, we're seeing it in the NBA, where guys are really trying to use their platform to spread social justice awareness and racial equality awareness. So But Dak also said you want to be united in having a plan there. So, and what Mike McCarthy spoke about last week was we just got back together as a team. So give us time to figure out what we're going to do.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good point there because let's face it. I mean, he talked about, what was it? Did he say it was today? It was the first time they had everybody on the field together, offense and defense. I think, you don't want to rush into things, and Dak was right because, boy, if you say the wrong thing in this day and age, you can get crucified. So you got to be very careful and have this thing thought out before you speak. And I think that's one thing during this time, 4 months or so, I think we've learned. You better be careful what you say.
And I guess for me, the other side of that is I'll be interested to see where it goes. It kind of reminds me, all through the spring, we said the NFL has the benefit of time to get its hands around COVID. Well, they also have the benefit of time to figure out how they want to handle this situation because really, I don't think this comes up on a national scale until week 1 gets here, knock on wood, and the national anthem is played, and then there's going to be a dialogue about what happens after that. That's obviously, it's a month from now, so they've got a lot of time to talk about it. But, I hope there's some genuine conversations and growth and agreement that happens behind closed doors over the next month, because it's one thing to say you're talking about it, but if they don't actually come to some productive conclusions, I don't think this is going to go away.
Dave, and what I'm thinking is the NFL has to kind of take the lead on this. They've got to kind of make a mandate of this is what we're doing, this is what you can do or what you can't do, because you know how we go to practice and you take roll to see who's all on the field? We will start this season taking roll on the national anthem. Who's standing, who's
Absolutely.
kneeling. And I don't think they want that. I don't think they need that. I think you got to come up with a plan and have the teams adhere to, okay, this is what's okay. Not let everybody do what they want nilly-willy, and then it's going to draw more attention to it by, okay, you had 20 guys kneel. Well, there was 35 guys standing. But somebody had their hand on the guy's shoulder that was kneeling. I don't think they want to open up that can of worms.
Well, and to speak on what Dak said earlier today, it's about listening and understanding where everybody's coming from. Can we get to that point? And that's very important. I will say, in a way to segue this back to the start of training camp, this does appear to be a very unified Cowboys team because Mike McCarthy spoke on it, Dak spoke on it. They are essentially creating a mini bubble here to start training camp. And Dak estimated it's going to be at about 90% of the guys stationed at the Omni as in that star district. And that really speaks to a commitment from the team to try to create as much safety, as much of a safe environment as possible to pull this off. And Jerry Jones, guys, I mean, he's always optimistic, right? But he sounded very optimistic that not only can they pull this camp off, but they're going to be able to have games at AT&T Stadium, a full slate of games with fans in attendance. That's certainly his goal, and obviously what he harped on was he wants football and Cowboys football to be a respite, a distraction, a good distraction for people who are dealing with this virus.
Don't you think that was a natural thing to do, is to encourage these guys to act like they're in Oxnard, to act like they're in training camp, and stay at the Omni as a team and not be traveling back and forth, because that's when you get yourself in trouble. And I thought Dak made a point of that, also of the fact that, I usually don't go out. I don't go anywhere, so staying in the hotel, not a big deal to me. You would be staying in a hotel in Oxnard. Now, I get it. You have the opportunity there to get out and, do what you want. But in this day and age, I think we've seen from the lead of the NBA and the NHL, these bubbles work. And guys, if they can just mind themselves and stay in their hotel and not wander out and go to the clubs and stuff, you've got a better chance of a team of staying healthy. So to me, I always thought that was natural, that's what they needed to do. And I think Dak put it at 90% of the guys are staying at the hotel.
This is going to sound really stupid because it's kind of obvious, right? But Dak really blew my mind a little bit today when he, basically said the team that stays the healthiest is probably going to win this thing. I mean, if they can actually get to a point where they play a 16-game season, I mean, in the world we're living in right now, it's a pretty good guess that you're going to deal with some outbreaks. You look at baseball right now, the Marlins and the Cardinals are a great example. The league doesn't stop just because of something that happens to one team. So if they can manage to play games, being healthy is going to be the best way to ensure that you have a good chance, which I don't know who it was. Somebody on the call asked Dak if they might consider bubbling during the season. He said they hadn't gotten that far, but I was sitting there thinking, man, that's probably a pretty good idea. The Cowboys have the benefit of having this world-class hotel on their property. You can't make guys stay there, but if it gives you a chance to have all 53 of your players healthy, it sounds like a pretty good idea to me.
It does sound like a good idea, and you got to emphasize that the league is not mandating players to do this, even for camp. Now, if they were to do that for the whole season, that's the difference between 3 weeks of training camp and potentially 5-6 months if you go all the way into February.
Oh, it would be a heck of an ask. There's no doubt about that.
But Mickey's right. I mean, I think the NBA, I don't believe they have had a positive test in their Walt Disney bubble since they got there in mid-July, early July. So, it's a contagious virus, and we're still learning about it, and it is proven that if you can social distance, and that's the other thing, just the Star itself, the world headquarters, it is naturally set up for them to get accomplished what they need to get accomplished with the protocols that the league's put in place. They got a huge locker room. They've got Ford Center to have team meetings in. They've got multiple practice fields. It is set up for them logistically.
Oh, absolutely. And, they're very fortunate to have the Ford Center there, to utilize it the way they're utilizing, to not only social distance, to have the meetings, but to have guys on the concourse for their position meetings, that they can space everybody out. That ends up being really convenient. And then to have the hotel there. The first guy I think we had one of these interviews with, Tyler Beadish, he was talking, one of the things he was talking about, what stood out to him, what Mike McCarthy said to him, and basically it was that, you have to make sure you're safe. And I think the thing that the rookie said, and I thought it was very wise of a young guy, he said, I've got a responsibility not only to my team, but to this league to make this work and not go out and get contract the virus and get everybody else infected. So while the league can do all this stuff they're doing, they've got to make, the players have a responsibility too to make this work.
And look, I mean, we've got responsibility to each other when we get back together to cover practice and cover games. It's just the way of the world right now. You can't just think about yourself, and that's where we are right now.
I'm going to put yellow tape around my desk so no one can walk through.
No. I'm wearing a mask all day, every day. I don't care how long it's been since I've seen y'all.
I'm with you on that.
I think it was mid-March, right?
Yeah.
It's been a good 5 months or so.
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking forward to seeing you guys. So we've touched on what they're trying to do logistically to get practice off the ground, get camp off the ground, get season off the ground. What about this football team? What are your feelings about what they can get accomplished in an unusual situation where it's a new staff, a lot of new players, new schemes? How do you think that's going to evolve now that they finally can get on the field here this week for real practice and start to get things underway, get the program kind of established here?
Well, we're kind of back to 2011, right? We saw it back then when the league and the NFLPA were trying to come up with a new CBA. And there was no offseason there, if you remember. They couldn't even sign players in 2011. And then they ratified the CBA on a Monday and Wednesday. The Cowboys left for San Antonio for training camp. So it's kind of the same situation. And oh, by the way, while Jason Garrett was the interim coach, it was a new staff that year too. So the unfortunate thing is for the 5 teams that have new head coaches, it's a little bigger transition without an off season, and then even worse this year without a preseason to try to put together a 55-man roster.
I brought this up on our preview show, and it's something that I've thought a lot about. I mean, yeah, the circumstances obviously suck. There's no way around that. But considering this is a new coaching staff, I'm very encouraged by the fact that there are pre-existing relationships there. Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator. He was there last year. He knows all of this personnel. Dak is his boy. You know, they've been tight since Kellen was still playing. And then Mike McCarthy made it a point to bring in coaches that he knows and works well with. Joe Philbin was with him in Green Bay forever. Mike Nolan and Jim Tomsula have ties to him going back. Al Harris played for him. So, yeah, it's not ideal, and, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, but it's not like this is a room full of strangers that have just been thrown in together. So I'm choosing to believe that can be beneficial when you're talking about hitting the ground running. And on top of that, I think y'all both know I'm a pretty pessimistic person, but you're talking about, the stars. Yeah, I know. I'm self-aware. But the Stars, this world-class facility, they're going to basically be bubbling there. I'm starting to really feel optimistic that this training camp can go off very successfully. I don't know what's going to happen when you start involving other teams and games, but while this team is getting together, trying to become cohesive in practice, I'm really starting to feel encouraged that they can do that successfully with all the, the amenities that they have working in their favor.
The other thing I think, guys, that they have working in their favor, and I think it came up, I can't remember if it was Steven said it, somebody asked about competition, what are you looking forward to? Or maybe it was Mike, and he said all of it. And if you think about it, we all played sports growing up, and think about what took place when you either went to a new team or got a new coach or a new manager. Everybody tried a little harder because now you got to prove yourself all over again. So I think from a competitive standpoint, there's not going to be many loafs in this training camp because none of these coaches are obligated to you. And you got to prove what you can do. And I don't care if you're DeMarcus Lawrence or you're, one of the lower guys.
Well, that's what, Mick, you're right. That's what they mean when people say it's a new voice in the room. That's what it means, because Mike McCarthy, when he first steps in, he's carrying extra weight because now they've put him in charge, and he doesn't have a history with really any players on the roster, except for a couple. Speaking of motivation, it sure doesn't sound like Dak Prescott is got any shortage of motivation when he spoke to us for 15 minutes or so. I think, Dave, you asked him about being motivated without a new deal in place by July 15th. It doesn't sound like he's lacking any of that.
Yeah, I kind of expected him to shoot me down and say, I'm always motivated no matter what. But he didn't quite go the opposite. But he was like, I don't know if I need to show something to the Cowboys or to my teammates, but trust me that my fire and my desire to be great is I think he said my fire is big and it burns bright or something like that. Yeah, I think my guy is pretty motivated to show his stuff this year. I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Well, and I don't think he was worried about that. And then I think that, he obviously hears things. And I think he put an end to it when he said, my objective is to throw the football for the Dallas Cowboys for the rest of my career. So he didn't sound like a guy that was disgruntled, didn't sound like a guy that wanted out. Didn't sound like a guy that didn't want to be here, that he was just going to bide his time until he became a free agent and was able to leave.
And Mick, it sounded like, from Steven talking, that he's still more convinced than ever they can get a deal done after the season, but they did point out that the current economics, the uncertainty, did factor into a lot of deals not getting done for franchise tag players this year. And there is a question about what the salary cap's going to look like next year because of uncertain revenue losses that are sure to happen because of the pandemic. That being said, I think both parties seem to think it's going to get done. It just can't get done right now.
Yeah, I think that was the bottom line of what each side was sort of saying, because there were circumstances that kind of complicated the situation, and you can't predict the future or what's going to happen. But as I've said on the other side of it, Dak can't. He also can't predict what's going to happen from a health standpoint. And if somebody indeed was offering me a $50 million signing bonus that I could put in the bank tomorrow, it's like I've been saying, boy, I'd have a hard time taking a chance. Not taking a chance on myself, proving myself, but just taking a chance on staying healthy. And that was my only point on, I think it's hard to pass up money in the bank today for more money in the bank for the next year or the next year after that.
I don't completely disagree with you, but he's already got $30 million in the bank. I mean, that's a given. He signed his tender, so he's got that to fall back on.
Well, he'll have that by time December shows up. He just gets paid weekly, so it's not like they handed him a $35 million or a $31.4 million check.
I don't. You're right.
The other chance you took, Dave, is who knows what the NFL was going to do on guaranteed contracts if they didn't play 16 games. That was another chance they took. Now, that worked out just fine because they're saying once the league starts and you got a guaranteed contract, we're going to pay it. But what if they had said, nah, you know what, you get paid what you play. We're going to prorate it. That was taking a chance, too.
Dave saw that he's built a practice. He's built a practice field inside his house, so he's doing pretty good, right? He's doing okay.
He said he's got a practice field. He always wanted a practice field in his backyard. Who has a 100-yard by 60-yard backyard?
He's not eating ramen for dinner, guys. He's gonna be okay, and I love his confidence because there's so much uncertainty with COVID-19, but in the long run, this is all going to shake out. Like, I think we all agree that over the 2 to 5 year picture, the NFL, like, things are going to clear up and the NFL is going to be just fine. I feel pretty confident saying that, which is to say Dak has absolutely a huge opportunity to maximize his value, and I think he's going to do exactly that. I mean, if the NFL plays games this year, I think Dak is going to make himself more valuable than he already was. So it's a gamble, but I think it's a gamble that he's got a very good chance to win.
You think he had the guy from the Cowboys go out and line his field?
I would assume he could get them on speed dial. Like, hey, grab some extra spray paint and head over here.
I love it. And I'm with you, Dave. I think he's set up well, even though the climate financially is uncertain. I mean, look, he is the franchise quarterback, and if they can't get a deal done, he is going to be franchised again next year if it doesn't work out by whatever date that is, March. And that's $37 million. It's just got to be worked out under the salary cap. And all that's got to remain to be seen because we don't know exactly what the cap's going to be. We know that the floor is going to be like $175 million. But that's a lot less than what it is this year, which I think is $198. But he's doing okay. He's doing all right.
I would like to point out, just for the record, that none of this stopped several other teams from signing big extensions over the last month.
But none of the guys
Myles Garrett, Chris Jones come to mind.
But none of the guys that were franchised end up signing long-term deals. I think one person maybe.
No,
that was it.
No, you're right. You're right about that. I'm just saying teams had money to spend. They did.
It was two franchise guys, I think. I think it was Derrick Henry and maybe Chris Jones for Kansas City. Got deals, and other than that, out of 16 franchise tag guys, it didn't work out. So there's merit to it, and they apparently tried to get something done. but I don't think either side was willing to budge enough. Okay, we're wrapping it up here. We got practice coming up, guys. How about that? Tell me, Nick. Yes, let's see. Even in shells, let's see it. Any update on? We know that the Cowboys had 2 players on the reserve COVID list that have been taken off, so they're good to go. Savion Smith and John Bay Johnson. What about injuries? Anybody that you've heard doesn't quite look ready to go when they get back out there on Friday?
Well, they did put the 2 guys on PUP, Tyrone Crawford and Donteric Poe, but I was told yesterday that that's kind of a procedural thing. They don't need to rush them guys in there. It also helps them with the roster because they don't. So they're going to be fine. Both guys, I'm told, will be ready to go. You just want to be cautious with those guys coming back from the surgeries they had. But other than that, Leighton Vander Esch, good to go. I think McCarthy said that Connor Williams, they'll kind of ease him in. You're coming back from an ACL, and it's not quite a year. So that's understandable. But other than that, it sounds like they're about as healthy as you can be heading into training camp.
Poor Connor Williams, man. I feel like every year there's a guy that kind of gets hurt toward the end of the season, and this, as frustrating as last season was, I think a lot of fans try to forget the last few weeks of it. So, a lot of people don't even remember that Connor tore his ACL. So I was happy to get that update that, they didn't put him on PUP. So, I mean, he'll be okay. They're going to mix him in at some point, but he still is recovering from that. So, to hear it from Mike McCarthy, it sounds like Connor McGovern will have a little bit of an opportunity here when practice starts, at least for the first few, days or weeks.
Yeah, it'll be a competition, and that'll be a good thing. And I think there'll be a competition at center. Now, obviously, with no preseason games and no offseason, the rookie ends up, starting off behind the 8 ball behind Joe Looney. But we'll see how quickly he can pick things up, because remember, he's the only guy that played center last year in football. I know it was at Wisconsin, it wasn't in the NFL, but none of these other guys played football last year, and that includes Connor McGovern if he was trying to put his hand on the ball other than competing for the starting left guard spot. And even Joe Looney didn't play center last year. Most of his 90 snaps were at guard. He only had a couple cleanup snaps at center. So that'll be an interesting one to me, guys, to watch.
I just want to get the roster in my hand and get my pen out and take the roll. 80 guys, and let's go, and let's find out some stuff. Let's see what happens. Let's see some football, Dave.
So you're actually excited to take attendance at practice?
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's amazing what 5 months locked in your apartment will do to change your perspective, right?
You're going to be on the other side of the building from me, so when you get that attendance taken, airmail it over to me, right?
No. Yeah, I'll screenshot it and text it to you. Hey, Dave, Mick, thanks for joining us. Chris, thanks for producing. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And thanks to Miller Lite for sponsoring this post-press conference reaction show. We've got all our shows back, guys. Starting tomorrow morning, 9:30 Central, talking Cowboys. We got mix shots. We got the break over the next couple days. So stay tuned to DallasCowboys.com for all our coverage. Training camp is finally here. Thanks for joining us.
Friday.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys?